Hi and welcome to Knit with Hannah. I'm Hannah, I'm here with Knitting Nerdy to help you knit with ease, confidence and joy. Big welcome. This is of course a beginner's class and anyone can watch this, don't have to be a beginner. If you'd like to figure out what your hands and your fingers are doing while you're knitting, this could be for you. I'm going to show you how I knit and what my hands and my fingers do for each of the stitches, the knit and the purl stitch, and how they hold the needles, how they move the yarn, all that sort of thing. Now, the style of knitting that I use is known as English traditional knitting. For some reason, it's grown up being called that, English traditional knitting. It's also evolved to be called the American fast knitting style. However, wherever you are in the world, you might be knitting with this style because it's comfortable. That's basically what I suggest you do as a knitter. You learn to knit however is comfortable for you. So this is how I knit, so it's how you should knit as well. It's whatever feels comfortable for you. If any of these tips help you, either knit more comfortably with more of a smooth motion so that the stitches flow more comfortably, all of those different things might just change if you pick up one or two of these things that I do and just evolve them into the way that you knit as well. Let's get straight into the tutorial now. This is English traditional knitting, also known as American fast knitting, how the left and right hands are equally important when knitting in this method.
Let's start with knit stitch. So as you can see with the English traditional knitting, I'm holding the left needle from above with the left hand and the right needle from underneath so that it's sat between my thumb and my index finger. And then I'm holding onto the yarn around my fingers. So let me just show you that in a little bit more depth. So the little finger just picks it up and holds it around like that. And then I go underneath the next two fingers and over the index finger. And it is the index finger that moves the yarn around. And you can see, I think what's quite interesting is, do you let go of the needle or not? A lot of people, if they're holding the yarn, if they're holding the needle from like this, will let go of the needle and move the yarn like that. But in English traditional knitting, it's more likely that you will be holding it underneath like this, well, and you will not particularly hold on to it for dear life. It's more like it's supported, and you can just slightly see that the left finger there is supporting it as well. So when the yarn goes around, it's still supported, it's not flapping all over the place and you haven't got any control of it. You do have control of it. You can grasp it with the thumb slightly and then just move the hand round. It's basically moving the hand up and down like this. So around with the yarn like that. So yes, we're holding onto the needle with the thumb and index finger and moving it into that first stitch. Now the yarn goes around, and then this is an interesting part. Yes, the right hand is doing most of this, but at some point the left hand comes involved as well sometimes, and just supports that, the left index finger just supports that needle coming back into the front of the left needle there. And then the right hand is basically in charge of most of that stitch. So we're going into the stitch, around the stitch, bringing that yarn that we've just put around the stitch, around the needle, through with the right hand holding the needle, and then the right hand is pulling the stitch off. Now, once you've done a couple of stitches, you'll need a bit of extra support getting that stitch off because it's a little bit further away from the end of the needle. So what we're going to do here, this left hand is very good at just moving the stitches to where they need to be, up and down like that. But what it can do is, if it's a bit of a struggle there, we can use the right index finger to just push the needle so that the stitches move as well, like that. Just show you that one more time. So I do this, it's become automatic, and I really didn't notice that I was doing it. If I've made the stitch, let me just show you again. If I've made the stitch and it's that little bit too far away from the end of the needle, automatically my index finger will move to the point of the needle and just push slightly so that I can get the stitch off more comfortably. So that's the knit stitch. In, around, through, and then if necessary, my right index finger can just help move the stitch off. In, around, and then this needle, this hold here with the thumb and the index fingers gets in position too, and that is actually holding that needle now when I'm just pulling it back. So the needle comes through the front of the stitch and off, in, around, back 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 and off. So that is the knit stitch from the right hand. And just one more thing, you've noticed now I've got enough stitches on here on my right hand needle for my thumb to not be holding it on the needle anymore, but for my thumb to actually take hold of the stitches from underneath there. So I'm basically holding the needle exactly the same. I'm just grasping some of the stitches at the same time because I'm that far along at my knitting. So let me just show you that one more time. Around, and now's the point where I need to do this with my index finger. Okay, so I pretty much ignored the left hand for most of this, but there are points when you're knitting. You might have smaller stitches or larger stitches. You might be doing a particular stitch which requires a little bit more focus, and you need to maneuver the needle in different ways. Like, for example, a knit two together, then the left hand will become more involved. So I'm going to show you the specifics of this just with the knit stitch. We don't want to get into abbreviations and more jargon now, but the left hand can actually become really helpful. So the left hand is holding the needle from above. When it comes to putting the needle into the stitch, it seems quite easy, doesn't it? But if you have small stitches, if like I said, if I'm doing an abbreviation that just requires a little bit more maneuvering of the stitch, then what I will do is my thumb and index finger will just hold onto the fabric that's already been made here and just pull it slightly so I can see the stitch that little bit more clearly. You can just slightly see that there. I'm pulling it so the stitches, just for the moment, just for those milliseconds, are slightly longer because they've been stretched a bit. So as I pull down on that stitch, it's easier for my needle to go in. And like I said, it might be easier for it to go into two, or slightly attack it from a different side or something. But I've overstretched this stitch now. So that was going to look a bit out of place on the other row, but it'll be fine. So yeah, my thumb and index finger can help sometimes, and it becomes automatic. When I know I can't quite get the needle in, or it's tight or something, like with the jargon, I didn't notice I was doing it until I had to notice and I realised what was happening. It was just an automatic response. My fingers wanted to help. So there you go. So my thumb and index finger can hold onto the fabric and help that stitch happen. What I also just showed you briefly a couple of minutes ago was that the index finger can be really helpful at this point too, to push that needle through. That might be because this is a very small stitch. It's been tightened because of particular jargon we were doing on the previous row or something like that. Or it might be that I've got 3 stitches on the needle because I'm doing something bizarre with the stitches. So that can be really helpful in times when you need it. Let me just show you that again. In and push. In and push. And all the while, the thumb is kind of holding on here, and the needle is basically between these fingers, and the pinky and the ring finger are actually grasping the needle at the back here. At the beginning of the row, it was grasping onto the fabric as well, but those three fingers there are really in charge of the needle. I am allowing my thumb and index finger to take a little bit more action. They are moving more. They're helping with the stitches. So my last two fingers, my pinky and my ring finger, are holding on, kind of curled around it. My third finger and my thumb can actually hold the needle quite firmly together if my index finger needs to get involved. And then if my thumb and index finger need to get involved for the actual individual stitch, then my third finger, my middle finger, wraps around the needle as well. So it looks, you know, Hannah's knitting, but there can be a lot more to the stitch. I think what's most important is that you don't try to copy me exactly. Neither, if you're just learning to knit, do you sit there and go, I have to do all that too. I have to teach my brain to do every single thing too. Once you've learnt the knit stitch and you're doing these things automatically, see, I just did that. It was an automatic response, and it was quick for me to do that. Once you've started doing this, your brain will make it easier for you. That's what I discovered my brain was doing, and I had no idea I was making these movements until I actually sat there and looked at it a good few years ago now, and I thought, what on earth are my fingers doing? Why, when I'm doing multiple rows for a couple of hours at a time of literally knit stitches and purl stitches, nothing else important, because I can knit quite fast in that respect, why is my thumb starting to hurt? Because it's so important and it's really helping me get these stitches in fast. I'm moving the fabric. Then my index finger is moving the stitch. And while that might seem fast to you, because it's automatic pilot, once you've learnt to knit and it starts to process and your brain gets used to it, it will speed up as well. It just wants to make it more comfortable for you. So this isn't because I'm some genius who's learned how to speed knit. It's because I've been knitting for a long time and my brain wants to make it as easy as possible. But this is the knit row. I will show you the purl row now and what the right and the left hand do on the purl row. So I've got a knit border. I've got 3 stitches on the end that I will be knitting, just so we don't curl at the edges. 1, 2, 3. So that was fast. Don't know whether I'll be able to slow that down and show you it more slowly. If I can, then I will do that in editing. It might. Might be a bit of a blur. So I'm holding the yarn exactly the same way between my fingers. The yarn moves to the front of the right hand needle. This becomes an automatic thing too. Dum, dum, dum. It's as if I'm making a stitch, but I haven't put the needle into the stitch first. It goes from the back to the front, from the back to the front, and it is just the needle moving along there. This is something else I want you to notice. A lot of the time, my right hand doesn't do a lot of movement like this. My left hand does the moving. My right hand is not moving. My left hand is. That is something that I didn't realise, again, until, I mean, it was a few years ago now, but I noticed it. but it just wasn't so obvious to me. And then I noticed what's happening, and that was that. So we're now going to do the purl stitch, and I will show you what the right hand does first. Yes, the right hand moves the needle into the stitch, but also we have a bit of movement from the left arm too. So we go into the left stitch on the left needle. Now, again, I'm doing a lot of movement here. The yarn goes around like that. And this is done thanks to the middle finger being over that yarn, and there's that little bit of tension there. So it's not flapping about and I can't control it. It's because I've got control of it with the middle finger being helpful. And we go around the needle, and the needle comes through and out. Again, the right hand doesn't move very much. I'm holding on to the needle more as I have to control it when it comes out, so I don't lose the yarn that I've just put around the needle. I've just made the stitch and I hold on to the needle again, and that's when I need to control how far the tip comes back, that sort of thing. So I do have control of it when I hold on to it like this with the thumb and index finger, like that. At that point, my other 3 fingers are actually closed into my hand. Let me show you that again. So the yarn goes around and I pulled it through. But as I'm pulling the yarn around, my fingers are further out. And then they close in and I'm holding on to the needle again, like that. So out to make the stitch, and then in, out, in, out, in, out, in. I mean, it's not going to be the same for every single stitch, but you can just slightly see that they are moving a little bit. And I want to keep hold of that yarn around my little finger. So that's going to be bent more than the others. Now let's take a look at what the left hand does as well. So again, I'm holding onto the left hand needle from above, and my last 3 fingers are taking more control of the needle. I'm using my index and thumb to help with making this stitch. I really didn't use them just then. I let the right hand do most of the work. But we have, again, I can make that an easier stitch to get the needle through if I want to. If you're using smaller needles with a particular yarn, for example, this is a worsted weight yarn, an Aran weight yarn, and it's 5.5mm needles. If I was using a 4mm needles and I needed a denser fabric, then the stitches would be smaller and tighter. So it might be more difficult to get the stitch open to put the needle in, which is when this would be really helpful. And like I said, if I'm doing more complicated stitches, then that's helpful too. But it's exactly the same. The fabric can be just slightly stretched just for that one stitch, and it's a second as I do it. Second, and then this is something I didn't really notice I was doing, but I hold the index finger just slightly just next to the needle so it doesn't move too much as I'm moving the left arm, and the needle is cradled between my thumb and index finger of my right hand. When it comes to this, we've got the fabric, and again the index and thumb can hold on to that. So we go in, around, and this is something interesting. I can use my thumb here to just maneuver that, because it's got not just moving back, it's actually got to move around the needle and out. So this is something that this right hand thumb can be really useful for. In and push, in and push it through. I noticed I was doing that. Like I said, I was getting thumb pain must be 15 years ago. And I thought, why is that happening? And I realised I've been doing more purl stitch in long rows of purl stitch on a particular pattern. Stocking stitch, and it was a small yarn and it was long rows. So I realised I'd also at that time sped up my knitting because I've been doing so much of it. So I was wondering why my thumb was cramping and just hurting a bit there. So that's the point where I said, you know what, Hannah, you don't need to knit so quickly. You can slow it down and enjoy it in a different way. So I am more likely to pick cables which spread the purl stitches out a little bit. I can't do lots of different ones because then the thumb becomes involved again and then it's over so complicated. But I do find that if it's just purl, lots of long purl rows, that I can speed up too much. So I have to actively slow it down. Otherwise my thumb starts hurting. You can only do so many exercises for physio, but the ligaments there just aren't working properly. So we have the purl stitch, and that just connection there with the fabric moves the needle in. The right hand really has to do that. It's in charge basically of putting that in the right position, but yes, the left hand is there. And then around, and the thumb can be really helpful. In, around, and the thumb pushes it through. In, around, and the thumb pushes it through. In, around, and the thumb pushes it through. Did you see what I was doing there? I was also, as well as holding it with the index finger, I'm sometimes holding that needle with the thumb while I'm putting the yarn through, just to secure it and so it doesn't flap everywhere. In, around, and out. In, thumb on the needle, around, and push the needle out from the tip with the thumb. In, thumb on the needle, around, thumb on the tip, and push it through. It is something that's become automatic and something that I didn't know I was doing. I just kind of made it up in my head, and that's what my comfort knitting is. That's what's comfortable for me, and that's what slightly sped it up. It's something that you'll pick up over time, or you may even start doing different things with your knitting because of the way your fingers are set. That makes it comfortable for you. So the easiest thing to remember is that I'm holding the right needle from underneath, and then as I'm moving the yarn around, my fingers are out, and then I'm holding the needle with both fingers here, and I'm more curled under so I can control what the needle's doing more. And from the left hand, I'm holding it with the last 3 fingers, and I'm using these 2 fingers here to maneuver the fabric and the stitches, whatever's on the needle. So there you go. That is...
Hi and welcome back. I do hope that was helpful for you. It's really fascinating how the left hand can feel just as important as the right hand, but we don't realise it. And I never realised it, not for a long time, until I actually sat there and slowed it down and looked at exactly what it was doing. It suddenly occurred to me that the left hand was just as important as the right hand. I slowed my knitting down. I didn't knit for as long during the day without breaks. That was one of my biggest mistakes. So if you are noticing pain or just a little bit of discomfort, just look at that too. Are you knitting for long periods too soon without building up? And also, are you knitting for long periods without breaks? Breaks can really help. I do have videos on yoga which will help you just move and stretch your fingers as well. And there are a couple of the videos in my courses. If you go and look at Winter Knitting Retreat, which is a very recent course, that actually has a 20-minute video on movement, all about helping you just shift and change the way that you're sitting, all of these different things that can actually really help the way that you knit and make it more comfortable. Now, beginners, I know you want to avoid mistakes. Who doesn't? But I have 6 beginner mistakes laid out for you. If you'd like to sign up for my email list, I can send you a PDF for free, and it will just lay those out for you, not only in the PDF, but just go into them a bit more in some emails as well, and help you understand how avoiding these mistakes will help you knit more comfortably, more confidently, and it will move you on as a knitter sooner and actually faster than people who do make these mistakes. So avoid these mistakes. I will leave a link for that below. 6 beginner mistakes you need to avoid. I think you might like this video, all about why knitting might be hard as a beginner, and it's not just you. I will see you again next week. Bye for now. Happy knitting.